Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 45th episode of ICC Biz Live, where we bring C-suite people to discuss business challenges. Now, today our focus is on EduTech, and we have with us a very eminent author, educationist, chairman, Mr. Satish Jha, who has written many books, particularly two books on education, the full plate and the learning stage. I'll show this to you. Uh, both these are available in uh, both these are available in Amazon, and forward is by Amitabh Kant, former CEO of Niti Aayog. Both books are path breaking. I have read one, and I recommend all those in the education sector to read them. I mean, these books are a call to action to harness. We talk about the demographic dividend of India, but how to maximize the dividend? There are some companies which pay good dividends, some don't. He has narrated a path where we can get the maximum dividend from the demographic. And but any other the more there's not enough I can say about Sri Satish Jha. So let's go over to him and hand over the mic to him. Sir, request to give a brief introduction of yourself.
That's the hardest part, Dr. Ashwin. I was an editor of a newspaper. I was started with Ramnath Goenka in Indian Express, a Hindi daily called Jansatta with Pravash Joshi. He was also uh, invited by Ramnath Goenka to help us start it. Then I was editor of Dinaman, which was quite a prominent magazine of my times from the Times of India group. After having done about 8 years in journalism, I went overseas because my wife joined WHO in Geneva. Dr. Manmohan Singh was there in South Commission, so I became one of his advisors. He had only a couple of them, two of us, but it was fun working with him. But I felt I wanted to do something more engaging, and I went for learning how to become a more corporate engaged person. And I became CIO, Chief Information Officer, with a company called Hoffman La Roche, which was a pharmaceutical company at that time, Fortune 70, based in Basel. There I learned something called management, and that led me to become later on chairman of James Martin and Company, which is now Genpact. And the past couple of decades, I've been investing in technology firms, bit of education. I ran a project called One Laptop Per Child, basically along with the MIT and Professor Negroponte. I did that for 4 years. And later on, I realized the challenges of that. And now I run a number of schools about only the technology part. I don't invest in land, buildings, or operations. I only help them learn like cell phone of education. In the meantime, there was so much to see and watch and challenges that I ended up writing a book called Full Plate, The Full Plate, which is a diagnosis of the situation and the learning stage is prescription, what can be done. So, that's a kind of overview. And that's what I'm operating with. Docs up.
Thank you, sir. I mean, uh, what to say? I mean, no words can describe your contribution. Actually, when we say it is easy, we prescribe be the change. You are the change yourself, and you are doing hands on. Now, uh, and you have talked about some other NGOs also doing value added work in the context of Indian education, but there's a huge divide between government and private schools. Now, coming to your book, what does your book, The Full Plate, symbolize in the context of education?
You see, the full plate is we have had a whole slew of prescriptions and policy changes and programs and projects in the past 80 years of independence. We created schools in the beginning, government schools. If you recall, at one time, 90% education was through government schools. We created higher education systems. We had IITs and IIMs with the apex, but the whole system was created. I remember my younger days, we had fewer than 100 universities. Now we have thousands of them. And institutions have been added up. Many things have been done. In other words, if you ask for any program, probably there is some program to talk about it. But the reality is that more than 90% students do not get what is called learning or education. They pass from one year to another. In high school, up to high school, there's no need for even sit in examinations. But in the end, what happens is someone who goes through the system capable of meeting the same benchmark that the world has set for that age group. So if you see somebody who passes out because of Government of India reports and ASA reports, ASCR, they all been pointing out for 25 years that more than half the eighth graders do not have the learning or skills of a second grader. That's more than half the eighth grade. That's a lot of indictment of Indian education system. So children go through this school education and they pass from year to year. They are present in the school, but their mind is not engaged. If you don't engage the mind, then they don't learn much. All that will happen is they can say, I went through, school. If you remember some 30 years back, there was inflation of degrees was a big conversation. Means somebody who applied for a job where requirement was high school, but he couldn't get in, so he'll become BA, then he'll become MA, he become PhD and applying for a job of high school. And even after that, he may not get it. Because the skill of the high school person wasn't even after be doing a PhD. So effectively, if your foundation is not quite right, then what you do. So full plate is about saying two things. One, that if you don't have everything on your plate, you don't really get nutritious meal. For instance, imagine a child who had to actually live only on a half piece of bread, or only dal, or only one sabji, or only one achar. What will happen to the child? The nutrition and the growth of the body and so on and so forth. That's one. Second, in some ways, government has a whole range of possibilities, full plate of every possible policy is there. But the child is hungry for learning. The students are hungry for learning because the ecosystem is not there in that sense. So full plate deals with it from 2 points of view. One, the inadequacy of what we have, and then the whole, kind of surfeit of lots of provisions and none of them meeting the requirement of learning as such. So that's where the whole idea comes from. Ducks up.
You are taking me back to that stage when I joined the industry. I was told first thing you have to unlearn what you have learned so far and learn fresh.
Yeah.
That is one thing you are taking me back. And another thing about Genpact. How long you were involved in Genpact? Because I was hired by one of the CEOs, Tiger Tagarajan.
Yes. So my assistant was Romi Malhotra.
Okay.
He was so when it was Jekis, GECIS, he
Yeah. Yeah.
became the CEO at that point, and later
Okay.
on, obviously Pramod Bhasin ran it, but my James
Yes.
Martin company merged with it. Okay.
Okay.
So I was not directly involved with Genpact at all. It's just that
Okay.
my executive assistant was Rima Luthra, who became CEO of Jackis later on. He left us to
Okay.
join them, and that's what my idea was that he should leave us to go to a respectable organization. And then it took off. I mean, Genpact became big, and later on, our company merged with them. So my
Okay.
association. So I knew Tiger well before he was in Jackis those days. So
Yes.
yeah.
Uh, Now, coming to your next book, what message does your book, The Learning State, convey? I believe it is the follow-up book to the full plate,
You see, the basic idea is if you know the diagnosis, you have to have prescription, right? So
right?
what the learning state does is, point is, And I've been arguing for that for quite some time since Vajpayee was Prime Minister, who invited me at that time to become member of Planning Commission. I think it was at 98 or 96, whatever, something like that. So I said, look, I'm not designed for that. I'm basically, I think differently. I was an editor. I wanted freedom. I don't want to get into that. But I discussed that. And my point was, we plan for 5 years. Now think of this way. If parents plan for the children for 5 years, what will happen? After 5 years, if you let a child go to the street, what will happen to the child? So when you plan for something, you plan to bring it to a point, then that they become capable, right? So 25 years plan, if you see for education point of view, by the time people actually understand anything, they have gone to the level of, say, 25 years. So it takes from K to PhD about 25 years. So plan for 25 years. And then what all is required. So it basically sketches out what all does India need to become a country with people who are capable of handling the challenges of modern times of 26 to 46, 47. What we're planning for is a 100-year celebration in 47. If you plan from now until 47 or 25-year or 20-year plan, probably we can get somewhere. That is the basic idea. Dr. Rajarshi. Hello?
Great thinking, sir. Great thinking. I mean, that should be the right path. Thinking to 20, 25 years ahead. Yes, after I can't plan for my children like for 5 years. No, I design a learning curve for them for their entire life, and even myself, I am engaged in lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And now my next question is, uh, how do you define human capital in the Indian context?
You see, we've been hearing about something called demographic dividend, right? Now,
Yeah,
it's a dividend only when the people are capable. So, okay, you have 100 crore more people. But if they are the kind of people you are feeding them 5 kilos of ration every month, are they contributing to economy or anything? No. So unless they become capable of doing things in the modern context, capable citizens, those who can do things the rest of the world does in competitive ways, they can handle things at the level of competency the world and technology requires, they will not be a contribution, they will not be value adding, they'll be a drag on something. So if they're a drag, then it's not a dividend. See, it's a capital only when it can produce something. So, for instance, when you say capital in industrial sense, you invest in machines which are new and that make you competitive. If you invest in machines which have been discarded, will it be competitive? Probably not. So, similarly, human capital becomes, when it becomes productive, when it contributes to the development or growth of nation, which can add value, is capital. Otherwise, it's a waste. It's a scrap. So what we have done is instead of turning every mind into full of possibilities and capabilities, we have left them on the table. We have not nurtured them. So think of it this way: if per capita income of the top 1% in India, say, is about 10 lakh rupees, and top 2% is about, say, 5 lakh rupees, and top third percent is about 2.5 lakh rupees, and top fourth or up to top seven, eight is about 2.5 lakh rupees. That's what it's all about. And as soon as you go below 10%, it starts going below a lakh rupees. In Bihar, per capita income is about 50, 60,000 rupees annual, which is below the sub-Saharan Africa. So what is there a capital in that? No, capital is only when your per capita income is at the level of the at least global average and above. What is the global average? Very simple. There are 8 billion people. There are 100 trillion of global value added. So about $12,500 is the average of the world per cap per annum. India is about 2,500. So we are 1/6 of the world average as of today. So are we a capital or are we basically scrap? So my point was, as long as a nation thinks of mining the earth, it doesn't grow in modern times. Only those nations that mine the mind, like the US does, they grow. I always think of it as what's capital here? Think of in the past 50 years, how many companies today in the top 10 of the world were born in the last 50 years? Almost all of them. And each of them has almost greater market value than India as a country. For instance, if you look at Nvidia, look at Apple, look at some of these companies, their market value is more than the market value of India. Means entire uh, corporate, what you call the stock market system, total valuation of all the companies in the country is less than the valuation of a company called Nvidia or a few, about five, six such companies. So these companies were born past 25, 30 years. So in other words, in 25, 30, 40 years, you can create as much market value as entire country of 150 crore has created annually after 80 years of freedom. That is the gap that I'm talking about. So if you have human capital, you will create something like Nvidia, you'll create like SpaceX, you'll create companies like Amazon. These are the companies that have driven economy in the past 30, 40, 50 years. They include Apple, they include Microsoft, they include all the top 10, 15 companies that you see. They're all new. They didn't come from mining or coal or mining of this or that. They came from mining of mind. So mine the mind, not the earth, is the basic thing. When you mine the mind, you create human capital. When you mine the earth, you create, basically workers who are not a dividend. They basically are a drag. Locks up.
Absolutely right, sir. You are bringing me to some thoughts. Recently, I had the opportunity to meet Professor Sandeep Man. He said, we don't innovate. I mean, we do not have that mindset to innovate, and innovation is the only way an MSME can become an MNC. And another thing which I felt from my own heart is that thank God I joined the industry instead of continuing on the academic path. Later on, I did PhD also, but again, my thanks I got industrial exposure. I I I believe I am not an ivory tower economist, and I am proud of that because ivory tower economics, what we see is something not engaged, not at all aware of reality. And we, those economists who go into industry, have a third eye. They know what is happening and what can be done to achieve results. Am I right, sir?
No, no, fair enough. What I would say is, look, every role has a relevance. There's a relevance for ivory tower economist, relevant for practical economist. Basic point is that any role that you see in the world, it has a relevance at some point somewhere. The question is, I have to be relevant at that point in time. And the great leaders, what they do is they think long. They vision for next 50 years or 100 years or whatever. But they don't just live in today. The normal leader has to basically deal with problems of today. Both are required. You can't say one without the other. If you don't have the long-term visionaries, country will just remain at the same level of per capita income that India has. So think of it this way: that world's average per capita income is about 12,500. India is one fifth of that as of today. Should it be so? No. Our capability potential is phenomenal, but we choose not to move in that direction because the people who decide for the country, the leadership at the level of political leadership, or you can say service leadership or executive leadership, or businesses or corporate world, they're very happy where they are. They're doing fine for themselves, and the country, is where it is. So, point is that we have to think in terms of who we are, where we should be headed, and if you say we want to be MNC, once somebody asked me, I was at Delhi University. There were several directors of several IIMs were there. So students asked, what should be our role model? So one director of IIM said that when you role model, think of Gandhi. So my point was, I hate to disagree with the directors of IIM. I said, then again, think about Gandhi's great role model. But think about who was Gandhi's Gandhi, who was Gandhi's role model. So my point is, if you're looking for a role model, you have to think of a role model which will take you from wherever you are to somewhere great. And if you like a role model which is keeping you happy in the current moment, that's what a lot of people do. Bollywood creates role models. They help us create. We behave this way. We stand this way. We talk that way. Our ambitions are defined by many films that we see. The literature does that to us. Newspapers that do, and our leaders speak the language. They talk about clarion calls, and they invite people to do this or that. All that shapes a nation. Every call by anyone who is in a position of attracting the interest, or you can say, perking the interest of people, they influence us. They all do. And somehow something happens. Sum total of all the influences we have had since 40, 80 years since freedom has been that our per capita income is 2,600. And don't forget, Dr. Saab, 1947, India's per capita income was about $52 per capita. We were 360 million people, 36 crore people. China was about 45 crores, and the per capita income was about 46, 47, lower than us. And Korea had about 56, $57, and they had about 4 or 5 crore people. Over a period of time, by 93, China edged past India at about almost $400 per capita. And since then, it hasn't looked back. There was a time when China was considered by professors in America 10 to 12 years ahead of India. Now I think it's perhaps several decades China is ahead of India. And because what they did was they decided some point in time to make sure that every Chinese is educated at a certain level. And they worked very hard at that. They've decided to make them all speak English. And by the way, Chinese, in terms of number of Chinese who speak good English, probably surpass number of Indians who speak good English, even though they began with the handicap of no English or almost no English as such. So because they decided to do that. Similarly, Korea is known for highest number of graduate citizens as such. Percentage of graduate citizens in Korea, I think, well beyond America. I think it's something close to 60%. I'm not exactly right, but it gives you a sense of direction. They're in that direction. 60% citizens of a country being graduates. That's phenomenal. So that's why the kind of growth of Korea is seen as about 40, $45,000 per capita income. China is getting close to 20,000. India is still about not even at 3,000 yet. So we have to remember these things, that we began the journey in 47 at the same level, and we've been falling behind because we did not see the way the world was unfolding. We were very happy in our own thoughts. We are great. And those who think we are great, just like Greeks, they don't go very far. They start receding. So it's very important, if you want to progress, don't look at the rear view. Don't think of the glorious past. You always think of what lies ahead. And that's where I think we have been copying, imitating. My world is divided into three parts. America innovates. China copies. India imitates. Imitation doesn't even have the discipline of copying. Copying is a tough job. Copying means it's exactly the replica of what innovator did. And what is innovation? And I'll come to that. We do not understand the meaning of innovation in India. We understand the word. We can read the book. But the spirit of innovation is totally missing. In that sense, I'm talking about. It's not that we don't understand the word. It's not that we don't talk about it. So if you see, in fact, I'm looking at 98, 99, Dr. Mashelkar had just become the DG CSIR. And then he told me something, why don't you go ahead, and there are 40 labs, national labs I have. You meet all the directors, or you can call them at one place and spend time with them. If two of the 40 agree with your view of how we should go ahead, I'll consider it a success. Finally, I did that, and we all came together. And so in the end, 6 agreed to be with me. But I told Dr. Mashelkar, of the 40 I met, everybody, every director of CSIR lab those days used to be also an ex-officio additional secretaries to the government of India. So I said, Dr. Mashelkar, look, I, I think I didn't meet a single scientist. I met additional secretaries to the government of India, all 40 of them. He said, that's the worst indictment of science. I said, Oksab, we don't have science in India. We have people who are smart, who are intelligent, who read books of science, and they know what's in the books. But the spirit of science that drives science, that's missing because scientific temper, which is required to be creative in the field of science, that's missing. And we are not at the level that we can do the foundational work in that area. We should be looking at technology at this point in time. Of course, those who want to be in science, we should give them all the necessary resources. But that's not the driving place for us. We should drive it technology today. Translation of technology in a way that keeps us competitive in the world while meeting the needs of our own population. That's what we should be aiming at. But you see, things don't happen because one guy thinks this way or one guy thinks that way. So a lot of thinking goes as a nation. In nation building, all our political leaders, they come together. Our civil services come together, our businessmen. I remember sometimes in 2000 or 2001, I gave a speech. I said, Indian businesses are not ready to invest in technologies. If they do, they'll be investing in four, five, six generation behind because the whole mindset of investing in technology, which will yield result in a longer cycle, is just missing, or they have no risk appetite of that kind. So, like recently, I saw somebody. What is most important about America? Some major, I forget the name of the person who said the biggest thing about America is the amazing risk capital of investing in future and long term. Now that requires, if you have that, only then you go into the future and you create the future, you shape the future. And that's when, like American per capita income is almost like $90,000 today. And it doesn't mean that everybody earns 90,000. Median income is less than that. But the point is, people at the top 1 to 3% are making so much that the per capita income has gone up to 90,000. The median income is, I think, closer to 60 or so, something like that. I got to look at the numbers, but the perspective that I have from reading over a period of time, that's closer to what I'm saying at this point in time. So innovation is something we don't even understand as a nation. I can tell you one professor at IIM, one of the IIMs, he began talking about look at the how a man survives when suddenly there's a flood. How he picks up tires and ties that to the bicycle. That's survival. That's not innovation. Innovation happens at the frontiers of our current capabilities. Innovation doesn't happen at the level of trying to do put the tire to a bicycle to survive in a flood situation. That is anybody will do. That's not innovation. Innovation is the frontier of knowledge. Where are we? So, for instance, if the world is living with a cell phone, can I live with something? Can I make a better cell phone? Or how do I process the data? Sometimes India says I've done UPI, but UPI model is again a global model. It came from America 20 years back. Of course, India has more people to transact, transactionally more, but where is the volume? India may have more billions of transactions, but in terms of the total value of transaction, America will be 30, 40, 50 times bigger. So point is not that. Point is this made it easier for people to transact, and that's a great thing. That is a good application of technology that we did as a nation building exercise. Similarly, in every sphere, we will think of how to take a technology and make it accessible to everyone. And that will create, that will be innovation. That what you're doing is you're taking something at the level of human achievement, and now you take the next step. But if you're going to look at what world solved 1,000 years back and then tweak it and then say it's innovation, that's probably a wrong definition of innovation. So our definition, our spirit, our sense of innovation is very different from what the way world thinks. Talks up.
So I just like to give one information. India has started manufacturing quantum computers at Amravati, Andhra Pradesh, and I know the person ex IBM, L. Venkata Subramaniam, and he has got a lot of support from Chandrababu Naidu. This is just for information. Now, coming back to the core subject, why do you argue that education reform should begin from the classroom rather than from policy documents?
You see, our policy documents have been talking about things for 80 years, but it hasn't reached the classroom. So essentially, most of the prescriptions that you could give, they're all there. But so it's like you go to a kitchen, everything is there. There is pots and pans and stove and gas and ladle and spices and vegetables. What you do with it is important. So your policy, you can say a portfolio of policies are right in front of you. But every single policy, if you ask me, I can tell you why it did not achieve the result we set out to achieve. Every single policy. And you can take anyone and ask me a question, and I'll probably have some reasonable argument for that, why it didn't succeed. Right? So my point is that just look at when Abdul Kalam was president, he said, let's give every school satellite antenna. Now, very fancy. I said, what will that do? So they gave satellite antenna, they got connected, and then nobody used them. All 12,000 or some numbers, whatever the numbers were. I went and saw some of them, nothing was used. Then they said, let's ICT the school. Well, 25 computers or desktops were given to schools. When I went, they were all lying in some rooms. Few schools I went to. I asked the principals, they said, if you use it, they'll go bad, and then I'll be accountable. So they were all locked up. I said, well, open it and let's see what children do. And then again, I went 2 weeks later, again, they were locked up. Similarly, government gave some kind of TV panels, etc. And I went there. So TV panel was not connected to the power, and the teachers were writing with some, they were using as a blackboard, right? You put their TV panel, but teacher is using as a blackboard. You look any policy that you created, it just doesn't work. I went to a school in Azamgarh, I think, yes, Mizban. Every classroom had been donated a panel in the classroom. Not one teacher was using it. So I went day one, nobody was using it. Day two, then I finally asked them. They said they're challengers using it. So what do you do? So unless and until you start at the classroom level and see what actually works, you can devise any policy, it will always yield the same result that ASER says. Eighth grade students, two-thirds of them, they don't have the skills of second grader. Does it answer your question? I don't know.
Answers very well. Now, you are answering that though we have the world's largest education system, learning remains a big challenge to us because of implementation issues. Now, next question is how should India measure educational success beyond enrollment and examination results?
Yeah, the point is, there's an old saying, maybe Peter Drucker said it. You get what you measure. So if you are going to say an employee he comes on time at the office, he'll probably come at 10:00. If you say if you come 10:01, you'll be penalized. He'll come at 10:00, he'll come 9:59. But it doesn't say what he should do in the day. He'll come, be there, and probably he still does nothing. So question is, what is it that you're expecting? You set the metrics first. What are you measuring it on? If you're going to say, are you high school pass? So they will try to high school pass. Okay, did you get 60%? They'll try to get 60%. The question is, that is not learning. That is education. So what has happened? India is a place in terms of examination where people want to pass an examination. You see, the biggest disease, the cancer of Indian society, from growth point of view, is the lack of proper education, which is then the gaps are filled in by coaching centers. What are coaching centers? Coaching centers are a symptom of disease. What is a disease? It's basically a cancerous disease of ignorance. What they do is, okay, last year or year before, these 10, 15 questions were asked in the board examinations. I'll make you good in those 10, 15, 20 questions. And whatever you get, you have to only answer 5 questions. The chances are you will get those and you will pass. That's what they do. So people know the answer to those questions which they were taught at coaching centers or something along those lines, but they never understand the meaning of that. What they learned. They don't learn anything. They know how to answer a question that will come in the examination. While if you talk to a seventh grader in America, you'll be surprised about the kind of knowledge the child has and the curiosity the child has and the way the child argues his or her case in any subject, any matter. And you can see the kind of engagement of mind in what they do. When we talk to our children, they are students of any class. And I'm not sparing even the people who've done PhDs as such. What they do is they know what they know. but they don't have the readiness to know what they don't know. What is education learning about? Learning is about how to know what I don't know. That's where we end up falling behind. What makes America competitive? Look, when we began in 1947, I think American GDP per capita was about $1,000, and we were at about 52, like I said, a gap of about 20 times. Today, we are at about 2,500, 600, 700. America is 90,000, which basically more than 30 times. When we, in 1971, Indian rupee was equal to one Swiss franc. Today, Swiss franc is 120 rupees as such. What does it tell you? The pace of growth of Swiss economy was 120 times India's, even though India grew in population 4 times, and Swiss population is more or less constant from that point of view, maybe 5-10% of growth in 80 years. So the point is that we are not looking at any metrics which is right. Metrics of learning. Are our children learning age appropriate knowledge in the global context? So if a student of India is 16, and by the way, there is no question about it, they have capabilities, but they have not been given opportunities. Other day, just 2 days back, I met in New York or Boston one student. He went to Doon School. He was fortunate enough to go there. He applied for education in America. He got full scholarship to Dartmouth and Skidmore colleges. And he is about not yet 30. He raised $5 million to create his own company here, and he came on a scholarship to America for school education. And he had the ability to imagine that I want to do this, and he pursued that. So I think every year about a few hundred Indians get a scholarship to come to American schools. America gives the scholarship. Then they become part of it, and then do extraordinary things in America. Similarly, if you think about creating those possibilities in India, for instance, we dropped the whole idea of excellence. When Kapil Sibal began expanding IIT framework to beyond five, I said you're diluting the whole brand image of IIT. You create different institutions. And what happened? Similarly, when IIMs were created outside of the 3 or 4 IIMs, I said they will only dilute the image of IIM. They will not build one. You create new one. So, but this is what we do. We want to monetize in the short run. That's what government has been doing. But IIMs had to remain relevant. In fact, Dr. I.G. Patel invited me in the Court of Governors of IIM Ahmedabad. I'm looking at 95. I wasn't eligible because the whole system was designed so many from this sector, so many from that sector. I didn't belong to any sector they could take. But he invited me as he was the chairman and he could invite, so he invited. So I explained to him, I said, look, IIMs are a great place because they pick up the best students of India who have the aspirations to become managers. They're not a great place because their research happens, or the professors who were once very bright and good, but over a period of time, they basically receded in terms of experience. So when C.K. Prahlad left IIM Ahmedabad to come overseas, and he became probably from India one of the finest minds accepted by the world as a professor of management and strategy, everybody in Ahmedabad was very unhappy with him. His colleagues were unhappy with him. But had Prahlad not come, today in America, India is known for Prahlad. Because a man like Professor Prahlad came to Michigan and he created, in his strategy, he was in on parade. I mean, nobody was comparable to him. I've sat with him, sitting with, chairman of Fortune 10, 15, 20 companies. He was in, the chairman is the middle and he's on the left, I'm on the right, and I'm listening to the conversation. And that is the kind of attraction he created that people wanted to. In fact, Philips chairman told me the Prahlad is the man who made me turn Philips around, and I gave him a room right next to my. He was just an associate professor at Michigan those days, so he had that charisma and capability, and so he changed thinking. That's what professors should do. Right, wrong, future will decide. But he was thinking afresh. How many Prahlads have you had in the entire IM system? I don't recall any. And he did something like that because he went out. So my point to Dr. Patel was our unless we connect us at various levels of global achievements and conversations, we will keep falling behind. Then our children can only go overseas and do well. So IIM graduates who go overseas, they do phenomenally well in general. They've done very, very well, as you can see. And we are very proud of it as Indians, though there is nothing Indian about them. A chairman of a large corporation of Indian origin in America has very little Indian about him, except that he was born in India. They don't think like an Indian. They think like in the context they are. And we forget that. So person who was left behind, who chose not to get out, he begins to in the local context. In local context, you see, my experiences make me. Our experiences make us. So if our experience layer upon layer upon layer is dealing with challenges of the day, we get caught up into that. We are not able to think of the day after tomorrow or a long term or future. We become in the moment, we become looking at the past, we begin to handle our own situations and challenges, and we don't manage to get past. Just think of a great example, nano. After 100 years after world started making cars, and they made all kinds of cars, we couldn't even produce a nano, which is totally done by us. Everything we have is taken, a technology taken from somewhere else. We didn't create that. Not even a single engine of that kind was created by us. Not in information technology, not in other manufacturing places as such. There must be some reason for it. We have to understand what the reason is and address that. Why is it that we have done nothing that the world says is basically world beating technology? If you've done something, I'd love to know that. That'd be great. That's a great feeling to have that we did it. But just one will not do. It has to be a culture. We do hundreds of that. Just one can be a fluke. Is it hundreds? I mean, when I was in Switzerland, often La Roche, so they tested me and they gave me a project. It worked out. Somebody said, maybe that's a fluke. Let's give him a second project. So I took second project. That also worked out. So now they knew that if they gave me a project randomly also, it'll work out. Now they have more faith in me and confidence, and they give more responsibilities. And that's how you get responsibilities, by proving that you can do this. Because somebody else is giving responsibilities, and you can't demand that. You can't ask for that. Similarly for India, it can't demand or ask for that. The world is there for you to take. It's up to you to figure it out how to do as much as the world can offer us. Knocks up.
My next question is, what kind of matrix you define for competency-based education?
You see, metrics generally is a very operational word, right? But for instance, I would say, you set a goal. What did John Kennedy do? He set a goal of in 10 years we will land on moon, and America landed on moon in 10 years. He said in 61 they landed in 69. So what you do is you set a goal, and so that's what goal setting. What metrics? The metrics that you set will shape the people and the way they think about it, the way they want to achieve. What should achieve metrics? So it should not be okay. How if you said how many patents they'll start creating patents, which mean basically they just meet the criteria of building creating a patent, they may be useless. I'll take you back a little bit of time. I was chairman of James Partner and Company, and suddenly there was Six Sigma approach came, and then there was this capability maturity model (CMM). So I said, now India will do very well in CMM, but doesn't mean that it will actually benefit from CMM. They asked me why in America. I said, because India is a good examinee without understanding the subject. So suddenly you found in a couple of years, the largest number of CMM top tier five were from India. They could get, but the productivity in India wasn't that high. So we become examinees very well. We don't become achievers in the same way. So because our metrics are different. So if the metrics is about achievement, probably you'll start achieving it. So if you say, have you passed the examination? Have you got this marks? They will end up achieving that. So similarly, metrics has to be something which is realistic. So what should be realistic metrics, for instance? So okay, have you created a technology that the world says is ahead of them? If you start saying that and rewarding for that, probably think something will happen. So you say, okay, in this area, here is the world. If you go past this point, only then I reward you. And I reward you handsomely. Now you just see what happens. And you can create that in every. First is you benchmark where the world is. Then you benchmark where you are today. And then you go from here to there. What will take you there is the question. And it has to be done in every area. That's one. But then there is something called imagining the future area, which nobody imagines. What keeps America ahead of the world? I'll give you small examples, and you see, examples help us to understand something, and they can always be counterexample. I was a CIO with Roche, and so I got to see Comdex in the US. And when I came there sometime in the early 90s, I think the number in my mind is 612 products were showcased in that year in Comdex. It's a massive, I think, a couple of square miles of buildings, and they get every country in the world comes there. 612 new products. You look at 590 odd products from America, only 12 products, about a few from Japan, a few from Europe. Everything else was from America. This is about early 90s. How did that happen? Even today, the ratio hasn't changed much. How did that happen? Because here there's possibility in terms of ecosystem of innovation and learning, and people are rewarded for what new they create. Now take a company like 3M. 3M is a company with some 50,000 products. And they reward people to be entrepreneurs in the sense they are the ones who made Post-it, for instance. Post-it is a very easy example to give because it's a very simple thing, but they found a glue which sticks and then unsticks. So everybody says if you stick, it sticks. But this is the glue that sticks, that unsticks. Now, this is a very different kind of thinking. So America kept solving problems. A problem comes, okay, give it to people, let them solve. We don't have problem-solving approach. And our problem-solving, we accept at a much lower level of barriers or threshold. So you have to go on increasing threshold as such. You don't have to get them immediately. You go on gradually. You prepare the nation. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So another thing we have challenged with this, what we normally achieve in 20 years, we won't achieve in 1 year. So that means that's best way to say we will never achieve it. So we are, we have questionable ways of looking at it on multiple counts. So metrics, what should the metrics be? I think any metrics which is not aligned with achievement at the global level will keep us behind. Talks up.
Institutions you are talking about in your book, Vidya Bharati, Ekal Vidyalaya, are they performing differently?
You see, Ekal Vidyalaya is an approach to help children who are in remote areas where there is no school at all. So what Ekal does is, from up to grade 3 or so, what they do is um, informal education. So some local teacher who hasn't done high school, but he knows alphabet, ABCD, Kaka Gaga, Ek, Do, Teen, Char. So he prepares students at that level when there is no government school, no other school, etc. But Ekal becomes in that sense a movement. It's not really schooling or education system, but it meets a need at a level when there is no other way to meet the need of any kind whatsoever because there's no school there. That's Ekal. Now, it sounds very fancy, but actually, if you educate your child at Ekal and you don't give them avenue to go to, say, Vidya Bharati or other places, what will they do? They will, even if you pass 10 years like that, you will not become someone who can deal with today's world as such. Now, they go to Vidya Bharati. Vidya Bharati is like any school system, except they try to bring in a few components. They try to bring in Saraswati Vandana in the morning, and it's beautiful, and they try to bring in their own culture, but they look at the same curriculum which state provides, state level curriculum or CBSE now getting into, or whatever the system says they do. And then they try to do that better at less cost. So the land is free, given by local community. Buildings are given by some businessman who can afford to give the building. School buildings are comparable to any other buildings, and they're like any private school or government school. So they have infrastructure wise, they're as good as government schools. They're not as good as private schools. Private schools may have, they have higher cost and they have greater resources, and they try to achieve different goals as such. So Vidya Bharati schools do much better than government schools. They come pretty close to Kendriya Vidyalaya for less. But they're not exactly Kendriya Vidyalaya because the students who come to Kendriya Vidyalaya come from different demographics, different strata. Vidya Bharati gets children from less financially, you can say, privileged people, while people who go to Kendriya Vidyalaya usually are second generation, they're children employees of various institutions, government, and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of gap there in terms of expectations and learning and home environment, etc. But still, Vidya Bharati teaches 1.5% of all students in India. 1.5%. They have 35 lakh students. They take 3 lakh, 4 lakh students every year. And they get a state board level 50% of top 10 positions in every state board, more or less, every year, sometimes the top. Vidya Bharati, there are, if you remember, India has about 17,000 IAS, IPS, and IFS. That's called civil service. Civil service only IAS, administrative service, police, and forest. That's called civil service. That is the allied services. There's about 17,000. 1,500 of them, they come from Vidya Bharati schools. Vidya Bharati school, they gave India the chief of defense staff. They gave India right now. I think a couple of chief secretaries came from Vidya Bharati schools. Some DG police came from Vidya Bharati schools. So they have done for less what government couldn't do. They've done for less what private sector do for about 3, 4, 5 times the cost as such. So that's what Vidya Bharati does. But more important, the teachers' salaries are very little, 15, 16,000 rupees. But they're lifetime teachers. They don't run away. They go to children's homes at 9 o'clock at night because they're interested in how children are doing. No government school teacher does that. No private school teacher does that. But Vidya Bharati teachers do that. They go to children's homes and talk about how are these kids doing? Do they have any challenges? Can we help them any which way? And they do it periodically. Every few weeks they will walk into a child's home. Every teacher knows every child. So that is the kind of very engaged, motivated model where teachers are, keen on their students doing very, very well. Again, their teachers' capability may be as limited as it is because we all have our limitations. There's nobody with unlimited capabilities, so they have their own limitations. They work with their limitations and they try to provide as best as they can. So Vidya Bharati is at a proper education level. Ekal is, so I would say if Vidya Bharati offers full plate, Ekal is like giving you half a chapati or just one half banana. So that's where Ekal is. It gives you something where nothing exists, which is very, very important. While Vidya Bharati offers you full meal of education and learning, it's up to you. Except the quality of meal may be not exactly what I would like them to have. Doctor.
We have overshot our time, but still I can go on with you for 2 hours. But I have three critical questions. I'm also opening the floor in case anyone in the audience wants to ask anything. They are welcome to do so. Now, three critical questions are left, after which we will wind up. One question is: you place teachers at the center of reform. What changes are urgently needed in teacher training?
Okay, so you see, teacher teaches. If the teacher doesn't know himself or herself, then what will they teach? Like there is a video, and you can see that it's online actually. A teacher very happily in some Bihar school. How many days in a month? 30. How many months in a year? 12. How many days in a year? 30 multiplied by 12. They rise 360. Very, proudly. 360. So in a year, there are 360 days. This is your teacher in a government school who's paid a very decent salary. Now, if I take example after example, the kind of learning they have is that level of learning. So how do you improve the quality of teacher? They are not the ones who come from very ambitious community. Those ambitious, they become IAS, allied, PCS, or whatever. They work very hard for local states. They want to get into services where they can get in by examination to a higher level of personal gratification. That's what they do. But then think of this way, a nation where every year 25, 2.5 crore children join the school system every year. But the total number of positions in UPSC are how many? There are 2,000 total, including allied services at the central level, and maybe about 10,000 all state level. Only for 12,000 students, how can you mortgage the future of 2.5 crore children? So that's what's happening. They all work for, and those who don't get into, some of them will become teachers. Now they've become teachers. They have no ambition, they have no aspiration, they're local, and if you talk to them, they will tell you, Saab, We get asked to do this, that, and everything else. Non-teaching jobs are given to us. We go for electoral duty. You got this duty, that duty, and so on and so forth. So they are treated like a government employee, where the positioning is in a school system, but they can be called in to do anything else, and their own role of being a teacher is not taken as seriously. Number one. Number two, a teacher has to constantly upgrade himself. Now, upgrading by examination is maybe procedurally the only thing they can do. But if that doesn't lead to the upgradation of teachers' capabilities, is as good as not doing anything at all. So teachers are not being trained constantly. And if you don't train them, when the knowledge, please understand, every 2 years, world adds as much knowledge as the cumulative knowledge of history until 2 years back. In other words, every 2 years, the knowledge base of the world is doubling. But our teachers remain where they were. I'll give you a small example. Once my son, he was, I think, third or fourth grade, and he wasn't doing homework. So we went to the school in America, and there were 8 teachers of his. They came and sat there. They met both of us, and we were talking about how is Ketan doing. So one teacher, English teacher, said, "Have you seen his homework?" But I saw the body language was very negative. History teacher said, "I've been here 25 years. He's my best student in 25 years." Others said something. Well, and then I asked him when I went home, so can you never show me your homework? He said, "Well, did you go to school today?" He was very smart. I said, "It doesn't matter whether I went to school or not, but what matters is I've never seen your homework. So maybe you should show me something." I said, "How about English?" He said, "Okay, if you insist." So he showed me. I said, there were 5 red marks. I said, "When I read this, maybe your teacher is right. What do you think?" Then he says, very interesting. He said, "But if you read Wikipedia, then probably I'm right." I said, "Show me." I said, "Well, if I read Wikipedia, you are right too." Then he said, "Then you will say that why should I not follow the teacher because she's going to grade me or whatever." I said, "Well, that's very smart of you to say that." He said, "But Dad, she is the best teacher in Maryland State. And she's also PhD from Harvard in English. But she studied 30 years back and she stopped learning after that. Who is telling me an 8-year-old child?" This is a conversation I'm having in America with 8-year-old child whose teacher is a PhD in English from Harvard, who is voted the best teacher in the state, and he has an opinion on her. And I knew that he will do fine after that. If he can have that good an opinion on his own teacher, that she stopped learning 30 years back after her PhD from Harvard, I know that he doesn't need my advice, he will just do fine. And he became, at 22, finished his PhD in Imperial College Science, and he's an associate professor in Sussex or whatever. He's doing fine. He did not need my advice. I learned that 8 years of his learning. My point is, that is the kind of bar that America provides for its teachers. What is the bar we have provided? I'll give you an example. I went to a school where I had given every single child a tablet. Every classroom I had given, and I've given from my personal money, our family money, and like that. Anyway, we did that. And sometimes I would take money only from one major industrialist who somehow felt like giving, and I didn't want to take it because when you take money, you have to meet their expectations. As a teacher, I was very strict. In this case, I'm sitting with the teacher, all the teachers are there, about 15, 20. I finally said, "Look, let me ask you a simple question," which I was asked by UPSC a long time back, and I got the highest marks in an interview in that year. And I said, "What's the diameter of Earth?" By the way, there were 18 teachers, not one of them knew. I had faced that question at 16 years of age in UPSC and got highest marks. That was long time back, 30 years back, 40 years back. Not, not one teacher knew that. I said, "Okay, what's the radius of Earth? They didn't know. What's circumference of Earth?" Whatever they said was nonsense. I'm not saying they should remember that, but I'm saying you are teaching a rote system where you don't know what the rote is. Our system is as inadequate today as what I just gave an example of. Not one of the teachers. So I said, "Then how do you teach?" The chairman of the board who was there, he says, "Sir, you are insulting our teachers." I said, "No, no, 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 don't think that way. I'm asking questions. Should a teacher not know that? You ask yourself. If you feel insulted, I have nothing to say. I don't ask the question. I withdraw my question." So this is where if my teacher doesn't know the basics of what they are teaching, If the year is 360 days, and if they don't know what the diameter of Earth is, what are they teaching? They're teaching what's in the curriculum. And this question is not in the curriculum. I tell everyone with management, with education, see, if a fact with one leg is very unstable. A fact with two is still very unstable. The first level of stability comes when I can have a fact which can correspond to three different facts, three different legs. It's like tripod. I don't know if you can balance anything on two legs or one leg. But three legs, you have certain stability. Four, you have greater stability. That's a table or tripod. So what does it mean? So if somebody says something, it must relate to something else as well, and two other things. If you can find those two and you're correct on that, now you could be probably correct. That's how it happens. And so, I mean, very simple things to think about. I was at one IIT, some convocation somewhere, a long time back now. So the point is, very simple example. I said two and two, and they said four, very simply. They didn't think about anything. Two and two is four. Two and three. So they said five. Somebody said six. I said anything else, and they stopped. I said, you are IIT. You're the best and the brightest. Two and three, any other relationship. They couldn't think of it at that point in time because they didn't expect such a basic question from anyone. Whatever the mindset was, probably the question was way below their par, but think of it this way. I had encountered that question in the US and Europe as well. But somebody who became very smart and succeeded, he said, two and two is four, but why? And that was the question he had. He wanted to understand why two and two is four. We never had that desire or need when that be an irrelevant question. But just two and three. Two and three is five, two and three is. I didn't say you add, I didn't say you multiply. The response was two and three is five, two and three is six. Two plus three is five, two into three is six. But I said, well, think of this way. It could be two cube, could be three square, could be two by three, could be three by two, could be, two log three or whatever. I said, I don't know enough mathematics, but I'm sure there are multiple possibilities beyond whatever I'm saying. But if you as IIT boys get stuck at two and three is either five or six, then you are limiting your own possibilities. That is a challenge. So teachers have to have that ability to go beyond whatever is immediate possibility. Without that, they will not. So how do you create a culture of training like that? That's what's important. So I want teachers to be ever curious, ever questioning, and motivated in learning themselves. They should be like Socratic dialogue we heard about. You heard of our old Mimamsa. In other words, if there is a question, what is behind that question, and what's behind the question, go on understanding and finding out. That questioning mind is what's important for the student as well as the teacher. Talks up.
Question, we have overshot our time a lot long. Last question is privatization of education in India has helped it, no doubt, but only where the names are big reputed peoples. Not all privatization has helped at all. What is your opinion on this?
You see, we are a society where some people are more capable than others, and some people are really more capable than others because of drive they have. Our potential is similar, but depends on the drive. I may have the same intelligence quotient, but if I don't want to get up, then obviously I don't want to get up and I'll be living with whatever I have. So there's some people who want to achieve more and they become our, basically business people. Some people want to achieve more as a parasite in the system, they become civil servants. Some people want to achieve more by earning more immediately, they become employees of corporate sector. Now, so they like little better things. They can't change the overall infrastructure, but they can change a few things they want to change. So their homes become better. They can buy better cars. They buy better international goods and so on and so forth. And they also want a better education for their children, and they pay fee. When I first saw there was a school in 2008 in Bombay was charging $100,000 per annum fee from children. And many international executives got transferred there because their companies would pay for their children to go to those schools as part of their, perks. Now that school had about 700 students and they all paid 56 lakh rupees those days. That was dollar was 56 rupees. Today they charge only 28 lakhs rupees. In other words, they have become more efficient. Probably they had more mortgages than whatever they did. But today, if you go to schools like Doon or about 30, 40 schools, their fees about 20 lakh rupees a year. And they have different kind of education. They're more engaged, they learn more about society, they're better connected with each other. Their aspirations are very different. They think on a global scale. So you get this kind of about 500 schools where fees are between 7, 8 lakhs to and above. That's what it is. And then you get to some another 1,000 schools which fees are about 3, 4 lakhs to about 7, 8 lakhs. And then you get to about 10,000 school of fees about between 2 to 4 lakhs. And then you get about another 30, 40,000 school where fees are above 1 lakh rupees. That's where you have possibility of a children learning something which will allow them to remain in pace with times. And as more they spend, that changes the quality of the personality and their aspirations and skills as well. But this is covered in any annual intake about 3, 4 lakh children altogether. But you are giving the system 2.5 crore children every year. We've just covered 3, 4 lakh children every year. And that's what India is. So this gap is going to remain unless we have a national. I mean, I'm not saying in America the gap doesn't remain. Even here, we have about 1,000 private schools where fees are from $30,000, $40,000 to $75,000, and parents pay and they like to be proud of it. But the rule is every child has to go to a local school in the town they live in, and that decides the value of town. That's the way they have organized. I'm not saying that's the best way to organize. I'm saying that's the way they have organized. Is there a better way to organize? Probably there is. Have you thought about created one? We haven't, so we don't know. So among the various systems we know, no system is perfect. They all have challenges. But ours is the least perfect or most imperfect that I can imagine. Probably there are other sub-Saharan African countries where there's problem. So okay, point being this, that aspirationally, we will have a section of society which should always seek better and better and better, and they will find their own ways of dealing with it. They've always done that, and the rest will be left behind. Unless we make a national priority and we begin to think of India that every Indian is just as capable as the one who goes to Zoom school or any school. They're all as capable. Let's give them a chance to learn at the frontiers of their aspirations. I always say, I want our children to learn at the frontiers of their aspiration. I don't want to set their aspirations. I want their aspirations to be free. They can fly as far as they want, but we want to give them those that environment, but they have to do something for it as well. It won't be given on a platter. If you give it on a platter, they will become totally parasitical. They will expect things from people. I think the biggest challenge, Raksa, we gave our nation is we turned our nation into a nation of employees. We want to give you jobs. That is a poison. If you say we want our citizens to become capable citizens who stand on the ground in the world and in the world where they can achieve at the levels of their own frontiers of their aspirations, will be a very different nation. So the leadership of the nation has to give a very different slogan. No working for jobs. Work because you can create a world where you can look after yourself and others as well. And everyone is capable of that. Everyone can do that. But that's a function of leadership. And that's probably where we have chosen a different path. Doxa.
Over shorter time, we carry forward this message, and next we will come up with a publication of yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doxa. Thank you very much.